Welcome to another episode of Well, Don't Tell the Kids. I'm Janet Lee, your host, and today my guest is Jack Quarles. Welcome to the show, Jack.
Janet, it's great to be talking with you today.
Jack joins us from a borough of New York City, where he and his lovely wife, Linda, are busy raising their family. There was a move. How's the adjustment going from, it was Midwest to near the Big Apple?
Well, from Virginia, where I spent most of my formative years, as you know, to a couple of years in Northwest Ohio, Toledo, now to Brooklyn, right in the middle of it all. And we're 5 weeks in. The kids just started school, and we're excited. It is a lot of change, but we're liking it.
See, but you're originally from here, around Washington, D.C., in a suburb, and you received your degree in history from Yale. Did you set out to study history at Yale?
My dad gave me advice going into college, and I think it's really good advice. And it was find the best teachers and take their classes, whatever they're teaching. So that may not sound extremely pragmatic for people that are thinking about careers, which you have to think about. But I got to Yale. I wasn't sure what I wanted to study. I found some great teachers in history, and I really enjoyed that field. And it's kind of a funny thing because it got to be senior year, and everybody asked me, "Hey, where are you applying to law school?" Mm-hmm. And I never told anybody I was going to law school. I'm sure of it. But I think
you were avoiding that.
That's right. That wasn't my plan. But I guess people assume that because of the major, or maybe because of me. Who knows? But anyway, I ended up going into business. But I always enjoy history as well.
Well, I've heard that actually from a couple people that I've spoken with in this podcast. They were both from Brown, and they sought out the best professors.
Well, I think there is something magical about a great teacher that you connect with. And I know that, you've got to be pragmatic and sort of somewhat focused on what course you're going to follow. But as we're sort of taking our girls to different lessons and different subjects and hobbies, I'm trying to follow that same principle where we find people that are really gifted at imparting a passion for their field. We love to spread that.
Well, that's wonderful. I'm sure their paternal grandfather, would be happy to see that going to the next generation. Then you earned your MBA in Marketing and Economics from the Kellogg School of Business at my favorite place, Northwestern University.
Yeah, you know that place, don't you? Evanston?
Yeah,
it's a pretty cool town.
Were you in the business world between the two? That's kind of a common thing. Or did you do something different?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I majored in history, as you mentioned. I got out of school. I really didn't know what I wanted to do on graduation. So that's kind of the downside, and I'm not sure I'd recommend that. But I happened to join a couple of friends from college that were working at a company, and they were just kind of, as a defense contractor, building information systems, and I liked that. And then I got into telecom for a few years, and then I went to business school. So, yeah, I had a little bit of business background. And really from the time I was 13 or 14, I came across a couple of books. I think A Passion for Excellence was one of them. It was an early Tom Peters book, kind of one of the first management gurus of the mid-'80s, and maybe some biographies of business leaders. And it seemed exciting to me.
Jack is the founder of Buying Excellence. And can you tell us a little bit about how you got to this endeavor?
Well, Janet, I can't really claim that it was my lifelong dream to become a middle management in procurement.
Oh, come on.
But that's where I found myself after business school after a few years, because I joined a small company that was sort of in the expense management world, helping companies save money on their phone bills, of all things, back when people paid 7, 8, 9 cents a minute for long-distance phone calling. And from that, I got into more general procurement. And procurement gets a bad rap, and some of that is deservingly so. However, I really enjoy the field, and I think these buying decisions of how companies make decisions about what they buy, whom they hire, whether to do something in-house or whether to get a partner to do it for them, I'm fascinated by this. I think it relates to a lot of decisions that all of us make every day, and it always relates to progress and change, and you run into a lot of the barriers there as well.
stick out in your mind, like an example of that as you experienced it?
One thing that happened while I was in the procurement department, and I worked for a huge national financial services company, and everybody knows the name, but I won't say it. But we found a vendor in which the company was spending about $1 million a year. And I didn't know who it was, but it belonged to human resources. So one day I walked down 2 flights of stairs to the HR director's desk and said, hey, can you tell me about this vendor? You're spending $1 million a year with them. What do they do? And she said, well, Jack, that's our background check provider. So we had a lot of call centers at the company, and all those people had to be cleared because they saw sensitive financial information for everybody they were calling about. So that made sense. But then she said, Jack, I know what you're trying to do, but don't worry about it. So I took the bait and I said, okay, what am I trying to do, and why should I not worry about it? And she said, well, I know you're trying to beat them up on price, to lower the cost, because that's what you procurement guys do. And she said, you don't need to worry about it because this company hasn't raised our prices in 8 years. So I thought, that's interesting. But I didn't know anything about background checks or what they should cost. So I scheduled an appointment with the vice president of human resources and met with him a couple weeks later and said, hey, can you tell me about this company? And he said, oh, yeah, we love those guys. And you know what's really great about them? They haven't raised our prices in 8 years.
In 8 years, yeah.
Now, sometimes you hear the same words twice, and it kind of makes your spidey senses tingle a little bit.
That's right.
So that was the case here. I thought, we agreed that we'd go shopping. We'd go out to the marketplace and see if there were other firms offering, better products, different things, or better pricing, not knowing what we'd find. And to make the story short, we found that we could get a slightly better product for a little bit less than half of what we were paying. So instead of paying $1 million a year, we paid less than $500,000 a year. And, that's a great story for a procurement guy because you come back and you say, look at all the savings we got for the company. So that's good. But if you flip it around, we'd be overpaying for years, probably millions of dollars. The reason we did was this belief that, hey, they haven't raised our prices, so we're fine, right? So I went to my boss at that time and I said, hey, I think they haven't raised our prices in 8 years. Turned out to be an expensive sentence. And he laughed. I've heard a few of those around here.
Okay. That's a good segue. And Jack is the author of a book called Expensive Sentences, which has been published recently and favorably received by the community. Can you delineate the basic premise of this book and what you're hoping to focus?
Well, when I sort of came across that phrase, I talked about it with my boss, as I mentioned, and it turned out that just about every project I was assigned to, I started finding these expensive sentences. So I'd be helping one group, and the vice president would say, yeah, I know we need to change, but we're just too swamped to do that now, right? Or we'd introduce a proven improvement to a senior leader of the company, and she'd say, yeah, well, our group is different, so that won't work for us. Now, those sound kind of like excuses, but sometimes people would say, well, it costs more, but you get what you pay for. Or, well, that looks like the right way to do it, but we've already started on this path, and you can't change horses in midstream. So these are kind of proverbs, but they weren't really aptly applied. And what I was really surprised to see once I kind of identified it, once I felt like the scales were removed from my eyes, was how many decisions in businesses, by senior level people, smart people at big companies, were made not on fact or process or logic, but really driven by these assumptions and biases or inertia, resistance to change, and just how much these little things cost different companies. In money, yes, but also in time and in opportunity. So that was kind of the phenomenon that I wanted to shed some light on. And so from that, I started talking about these expensive sentences and spoke about it for years, and then finally put the book together a couple of years ago.
I guess it sounds like it includes the myths or the lore that are just passed down in organizations, like, the sacred cows.
Boy, that's a great point. And you say myths or lore, and I think, local lore is something that can be incredibly strong. Sometimes you hear somebody say, well, yeah, they've been needing to replace that system for years, but it's not going to happen in my lifetime, right? It's amazing. Or they say, hey, our CEO doesn't care about R&D, right? He's not interested in research or innovation, so don't even show him that idea. we see how deep in an organization this sort of resistance can be. Now, I don't think it's always the same, and I think it is at different levels at different organizations. But I think we can all be aware of this because we say a lot of these ourselves, and what's particularly interesting to me are the ones that really sound pretty good, but end up being very costly. One of those is, we can probably do that ourselves.
I assume your book is not just telling us all what the critique is, a way to gently redirect that, or maybe it's not a gentle redirection. Maybe how does an organization deal with that?
Well, that's a great question, and gentle redirect, I think, is a great way to start, because really it's at the conversational level that we have access to some of this, and that so many of these things are set in stone. I think we all have great power in our words, and particularly when people are in a leadership position, a little phrase that they cast off that may seem pretty, harmless or even smart might end up doing a lot of harm, right? One that people use a lot in business is they say the customer is always right. Let's do this for them. But of course, the customer is not always right. Following your customers, especially the demanding ones, can drive you out of business. They might be the right customers for somebody else. So the first step I recommend is to diagnose whether these are expensive. And the three key words to be on the lookout for are scarce, special, and stuck. In other words, when something is scarce, when someone is special, or when you're stuck, that's when these sentences can really do harm.
What do you mean by scarce? Like the resources are scarce?
So scarce... Yeah, exactly. So scarce, hey, they're the only ones that have that technology, or, they're running out of that. Or I even think the customer is always right is a form of scarcity, because it's saying, hey, we've got to do whatever we can for whatever customers we have, right? There aren't more people out there who'll buy what we're good at, so we better do whatever these folks are asking for. So, yeah, and of course, when something is scarce, what do? You pay more for it, you hoard it, you start changing your decisions based on the lack of that resource. Now, there is true scarcity, and that's a reality of the world. However, I think a lot of times we think something's scarce when it's really not, and that's what you want to challenge.
And when there's challenge, then find new pools of abundance. Here's more resources or revenue that can flow in for our services.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So if we take that one, let's say it is the customer's always right, and let's say it's a business context when a customer is demanding something, and it's sort of a high-profile customer, and it's demanding something that's outside what the company's selling. So let's just say that it's a software company, and they've got a core product, but it was one customer, one of their top customers is saying, hey, we need you to do this extra module. We need a lot of customization, so we'll do this extra feature. Now, I think what we want to say is, yes, the customer is always right. The challenge with these sentences is there's always some truth in it, right? You can't claw your way to the top over unhappy customers. You gotta do something that some customers are going to be excited about. So I follow a simple sort of formula of why, when, what if. Why is it true? When is it true? And what if it's not true? So when we say,
I like your alliteration, because I like your
if it's not easy to remember, you won't use it. So we got to do that.
S and S and WWW. Okay.
Absolutely. So why is it true the customer is always right? Okay, we've got to have some enthusiastic customers. We know that. Now, when is it true? Well, it's true that we need to have customers that are excited about us, that are good customers for us. So in other words, when you say when is it true, that also suggests, well, there are times when it's not true. So if this is a customer that's demanding something that we can't profitably sell to them, or if this is a customer that's asking us for something that's going to lead us away from our strategy, well, then that's not the customer that we can serve well. And then finally, what if it's not true? So what if, instead of going back to this customer and just giving them whatever they demand, what if we go back to them and have a conversation and say, hey, we're positioned to do these pieces for you and do them well, and that way, you get surplus and we make money. However, we can't do this other piece for you. That's something that maybe we can help you find somebody else to do, or maybe we can work with your team to sort of change your processes so you don't need to do that anymore. So again, it's opening up and seeing the benefit of what if this restriction, this expensive sentence, isn't really limiting us the way we think it is. Why is it true? When is it true? What if it's not true?
Yeah, that's very wise set of questions to ask. It strikes me as everybody has their boundaries, the customer and the provider. Keeping those boundaries firm or redefining the boundary or just understanding where everybody's at, it sounds like it's helpful and expandable to other arenas as well in life.
Well, I think you're right, Janet. And the story I retell in the book a little bit. Did you ever see the movie Bruce Almighty with Jim Carrey?
Yes. Uh-huh.
So it's a pretty good Jim Carrey role. And there's this scene where God gives him the power to kind of run the universe, right? So he has all these. He starts hearing all these prayers coming in, and then he figures he can convert the prayers into an email system. Okay, so he sits down at his computer and starts reading all the emails, and they say, my dad's sick, or they say my boyfriend needs a job, or they say, I'm lonely, or whatever the prayer requests are. Right? He's getting all these prayer requests coming in, and so Jim's sitting there, kind of, or Bruce, I should say, Bruce Almighty is sitting there answering these prayers one by one. But then he finds that the volume of prayers is growing faster than he's answering them. So he's got 2 million prayers. And so he says, what can I do? And he finds a reply all button, and he just types back yes, Y-E-S, and says, okay, now everybody's going to be happy. But it doesn't quite work out that way. Yeah, exactly. And so all these, unintended consequences kind of intersect, and the world kind of becomes disastrous with everybody's getting yes. And so, look, we can take that a little more limited sphere, but we all have people that we have to answer to, whether we're parents answering to kids, whether we're children answering to teachers, if our job is at a church and we're answering to people in our congregation, whatever it is, we've got to have some audience and some people that we need to set boundaries with, just like you said. And so it's really important to be able to recognize that, or else we'll all just be too driven and too reactive by whoever tends to be around us.
There's a nice proverb about that, neighbors and fences or something like that.
Oh, yeah, I think I've heard that one.
Now, let's back up a little bit. I know that you are quite talented in many arenas. Did you start a group at business school for singing?
I didn't. I can't claim to start it, but I was in it. Yes. Janet, I did a cappella back when a cappella wasn't cool.
You were a pioneer in there.
Oh yes, that's right. But your response is supposed to be, Jack, a cappella is still not cool. But anyway, for some people it is. and both in college and in business school, I got to be in an a cappella group. And in business school, I did not start the group, but I did manage it one year, and we cut an album, and it was a lot of fun. What
was the name of that group?
It was called The Bottom Line, of course.
The Bottom Line.
Yeah, exactly. the B sharps. You got to have a bad pun in your a cappella group, or you're not legitimate. So if your title's not a bad pun, then forget about it.
I know that at the undergrad level, Northwestern has a fine music program. So how did the business singing group go? How was that a cappella? Like the quality of that, was that? I think I've listened.
Well, I think our quality was pretty good, but I will say this: it is like everything. There's a lot more visibility. Now everybody has YouTube videos of everybody all over the world, and from what I've heard, the groups that are now at colleges are a lot better than we were. I just got to be honest. We were right before they started doing the percussion and the beatbox for everything. So we had a guy that did that a little bit, but now I think most groups have that, and just the tone and the tuning together. I really enjoy hearing the groups I hear now.
But before that, you were in I don't know what to call it. It's just foundational. It may be one of the oldest a cappella groups in the country, in the world, in your undergrad, correct?
That's right. Now, it's part of the Yale Whiffenpoofs, and they are the oldest college a cappella group. They might be the oldest college singing group.
Wow.
Yep, they've been around a long time. It's just for seniors at Yale, and to date, it's still just men. There's a women's group which is very comparable, and that was a real honor to be in. It was a cool thing, and once in a lifetime opportunity.
And what is the female group or the women's group called?
The female group is called Whim and Rhythm. Whim and Rhythm. So it's a little pun there. Women. We toured with them and sang with them, and it was a highlight. I mean, I look back and you get to do some fun things at school that you don't do any other time, and that was one of those things for sure.
And I have one more question about that. So I've always wondered, what is with the name Whiff and Poof?
So it's not a very satisfying answer, but it was apparently some sort of mythical dragon, and it was referenced in some Broadway musical of 1910 or something. So it's just kind of obscure, and it's one of those things that if you're in the know and in that circle, it's a big deal, and if you're not, you sort of say, that's weird.
Well, I guess I'm in the latter group. No, but I've heard the singing, and it's very entertaining and enjoyable and moving. So that's the thing that you want to go after when you're producing art. Any advice to young persons who want to venture into the business world?
One of the things I like about your podcast is you're talking to people that have really followed their passion. And to me, that's the key. You got to follow your passion. When you say the business world, that's 10,000 different things, from doing graphic design to crunching numbers and finance all the time to starting a new way for people to drink their soda. They're just all sorts of different things. So I think being solution oriented is key. In other words, you got to be solving a problem that matters for people if you want people to pay for it. That's just very basic. So keep thinking in those terms. But beyond that, I'd say, keep looking around, try different things, and find things that you really enjoy, and go after your passion. It is really neat with, just all that's accessible to young people today in terms of entrepreneurship, in terms of education online, even things like the TV shows like The Profit or Shark Tank that highlight, some of these people starting their businesses. I think there's a lot to be learned from that. And I feel like my girls, going into middle school are getting a much better business education than I had coming out of college.
That's interesting.
No, it's a good question. And I think, you and I both come from kind of the old East Coast sort of liberal arts mentality, and we were trained that way. And I think that's a good thing. However, I think the market realities were not always part of that training. And when we see, when our girls are watching somebody come on Shark Tank and they say, hey, this is this new way for, I don't know, a mom to take care of her kid and, put diapers on or something. And, they have a lot of sort of specific things. My girls are sitting there saying, well, now who would buy that? And is it really better than what's on the market now? And, are they asking too much for their company? And all these questions that I think are kind of street savvy and very practical and very relevant, but you don't always get out of a textbook.
I'm just trying to imagine Family Hour with your sitting around O'Leary and Cuban and oh my gosh, hook into it. So that's interesting.
Well, and I will say this, and I think it applies. I think you get this too. But both my wife and I, believe that you need a job that pays the bills, but you really want to have a career that you feel like is important, doing work that matters, and doing something that you love. Now, I say that, and I've struggled through many years when I haven't really been able to do that. And, it's not always easy to find something you love that fits that. But I don't think you should give up. I think we all need to keep searching for how we can contribute in a way that's meaningful to others and meaningful to us.
That is actually there's some certain themes that come out over this series, and that's one of them. Just to be aware and to be adaptive and to not be too attached to certain ideas and ready to see the opportunity and then to move on it based on, they always say preparation. My guests say a lot about preparation. Be ready. So that's about all the time we have for now. I wanted to thank you, Jack, for your insights and conversation.
Thank you, Janet. It's so fun to talk to you.
And thank you all for listening. My guest today, once again, has been Jack Quarles. I'm Janet Lee, so please stay tuned for more episodes of Well, Don't Tell the Kids.